We're working the Stanley Cup Final on the Chirp Podcast with Darren Millard. Ray Ferraro for ESPN joins us, diving into who has more urgency to win this series, and the favorite is Ray Ferraro is next.
Boys, I'm Mike today. Just let everyone know, don't say anything stupid.
Heads up! Oh, how'd that feel, old man?
What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna run you. I'm just waiting for my shift.
You guys are sensitive over there.
It's one of my favorite episodes of the year. You get down to the Stanley Cup Final and you preview the two teams that are left. It's a very narrow focus compared to what we normally do, talking about league-wide issues. This is all about the next 2 weeks and crowning a champion, and there's really no surprise this year with the participants. Both these teams, at the start of training camp, had legitimate aspirations to get here. It was Stanley Cup or bust. They both overcame respective challenges early in their season to play for this Stanley Cup championship. Florida into the final for a second straight year, and we've got an Eastern Conference dynasty thing happening with the Panthers. That's 3 great regular seasons in a row, reaching the championship series in back-to-back years. And as for bigger picture, in state, the Panthers picked up right where the Lightning left off, or there was a baton handed. But that's 5 straight years that a team from the state of Florida is in the Stanley Cup Final. So that's one aspect. The Panthers haven't won like the Lightning did, so they're trying to get to that stage and knock another team off the list. Check another team off the list that's won a Stanley Cup championship because the Florida Panthers, as a franchise, have never won this. And then you've got the Edmonton Oilers. The world's best player is on this stage for the first time. And to talk about it, let's bring in ESPN's top analyst. Here's Ray Ferraro. He'll be between the benches for the Stanley Cup Final as the worldwide leader has the Stanley Cup Championship Series. And Ray, there's 2 avenues that you can go down here. What's the number one story? What's your focus going into this final?
I mean, we can try and find the 8 different things that are really interesting, but it's the best player in the game making his first final. And how does he respond? How do the Panthers respond to him? I mean, we can talk about the power play. We can talk about, how they're going to play 5-on-5. Eventually, Darren, it gets back to McDavid anyway. Mm-hmm. So we might as well start there because that's really, I mean, I'm fascinated watching how he has matured in his game, but in his way, the way he handles things, the way that he's able to push himself and find something else that he can be a little bit better at. I think that's a mark of some of the great players is like they're already great and then they find something else. But like even the goal he scored in Game 6, I mean, I don't know how many times you've watched it, but when your feet are like at kind of 10 and almost 3 o'clock, you should not be able to go forward anymore. Like, kind of physics tells you can't, but when he went around Heiskanen, he was still kind of going forward as he was going sideways. He does things other people can't. And so I'm fascinated by it. And as much as the Panthers are back for, a second straight trip, and I do think they're the best team. I think they're, since Christmas, January, I watched them when I was game in Detroit, and I was like, oh my God, these guys are a machine. But the story to me is McDavid.
I watched it, I'll be honest, 12 times before the puck was dropped for the face-off after the goal, trying to figure out how he did it.
Because doesn't he look stuck? Like there's just like nowhere to go. And like everybody can train the same. Everybody could use all the same equipment. There's just something special, gifted, different with McDavid to play. And I mean, we watched it for years. If you're our age, we watched it with Gretzky and all the things he would do that they all seemed like you should be able to do them, but nobody else could do them. And so there are naysayers always, and I don't get it. Like, people just like to kick somebody in the shins for something. And I'm like, but there's like the discussion point of, well, he hasn't won yet. How could he be a generational player? There are lots of players that win that are not great players. They just I call them accidental tourists. They're just they're in the right place at the right time. And there are lots of great players, Hall of Fame players, that never win. This is not golf. Like, if Connor has a great series and he's on the ice 22 minutes a night, that means 38 minutes somebody else is out there. And you can't do anything about it. You can only do what you can do.
So you've been around the final plenty of times. There's a different feel. Florida even admitted that they're more comfortable this time around. How do you think the big stage and everything that goes with it will impact Edmonton? Because it is different.
I think it'll be fun, and then it'll be a pain in the rear end, because it's everywhere. Every time you travel, you don't get a day off. You travel, you have media availability, and then the next day you have media availability, and then you've got to practice and you've got to prep. You're probably getting some treatments. Like the days are long, even though there are 2 games between the travel days. I think back often to, like, when we went to the conference final in '93. By the time we got eliminated, how exhausted I was. And we had won 7. We had 7 wins to go. Like, we had won 9 games at that point. And so these guys are 3 wins further, and they still have to win 4 more. It always seems like it's a different animal, but it doesn't mean you can't win the first time. There's something about Florida, though, and maybe it comes from Paul Maurice, I don't know, but they're just so confident in the day. They're like, we might not be great today, but then we'll be great tomorrow. He had a line in, they were playing the Rangers in, I want to say it was late February, early March, and they were all banged up at this time. And he said, I'm concerned, but I'm not worried. And I just thought it was like
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great line. Like, we've lost 3 out of 4 or whatever it was. Of course I'm concerned, but I'm not worried. And that really seems to be the way they go about things. In the Ranger series, there were times when it seemed like they should be up more, and they weren't. And they just kept plodding along, and eventually they were able to win. There's a confidence there that I don't think you can just manufacture it. It has to be earned.
Florida looks like a different team than they were at this stage a year ago.
Oh, health-wise, it's not even close. I mean, Aaron Ekblad's not walking around in a walking boot. Montour had surgery right after the season as well. Remember, back to the start of the year, there was some thought that Florida was going to be slow out of the gate because they didn't have a third of their defense, and they had a short summer, and they're a different group of the same guys. Like, there's the other thing too, is like, it's not like half the team's back. Like, almost all of the team is back. Evan Rodriguez is new. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is new. There's very few. Tarasenko's new, but he's been here, he's been to this stage before. They're confident. They expect themselves to play well. And if they lose, then they say, okay, we lost today, and we'll figure out a way tomorrow. I do think Edmonton can win. I just think this really feels like it's Florida's time. And the difference to me this year to last is, last year, it felt like it was a foregone conclusion starting the finals. It just was like, I don't know how long it's going to take Vegas to win, but they're going to win. And I don't have that feeling this year. Like, what I have this year is long series. That's kind of what I have in my head.
There's anxiousness on both sides with Connor and Leon and that group finally reaching the final, and Florida being back for a second consecutive year. Who do you think, pressure's the wrong word, but who has more on their shoulders to get this done?
Oh, Connor, for sure.
Yeah.
Because
Florida losing back-to-back would be devastating.
It would be, for sure. Man, I would have loved to have lost back-to-back finals. I would have loved to have had the opportunity, right? Like, it's amazing to be this good 2 years in a row. Is, to get through the playoffs 2 years in a row to this stage is is amazing. After, I don't know, after Connor and Leon became like legit superstars, I don't know, whatever year it was, year 3 or something or other, when are they going to win? Conference final was good. Conference final's not good enough. You get to this point where your fans and the media and the outside pressures build on your own internal pressures. They start to wait because you have your own pressure, right? Like he wants to win and Leon wants to win. Like they're great players and they know people, and their view of them is that they have not won. Yet, as I go back to, you can only do what you can do. But since that time, you know, when they became like went to the Western Final, and that the only question is when are they going to win? And so I think the pressure sits heavily on star players all of the time. It's great to have depth, but if your star players don't play, you can't win.
Coaching matchup is interesting. You've got one guy who's right up there with the most coaches games played or games coached ever, and then Kris Knoblauch, who's in the shadows. You barely even notice the guy.
I've often wondered, because it's been, maybe you would know, but like it's been quite some time where Kris Knoblauch has been considered a really good coach.
Yeah, in
back
Western
to
League and Ontario Hockey League.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason he gets looked past or has been looked past in the past is whatever the opposite is of a self-promoter is Kris Knoblauch.
Yes.
He's just there. Except when you talk to him, he's so impressive. I think he's got, when we got a chance to do a few games, I said to some people, he's got that farmer smarts to him. You know, like he knows what he has to do. He doesn't need to tell everybody about it. He just goes and does it. And if you watch him on the bench, I often think I'd love to have a heart monitor on him. Like to see, like when the building's just going wild and there's something crazy happening, does his heart rate go anywhere? Because it never looks like it. I look at in his first year, and so you can say that, oh, why wasn't he hired before? But clearly 31 other teams didn't think he was ready to coach their team either, or else he would have been hired before. He took Corey Perry-O, not easy to do. He took Stu Skinner out in games 4 and 5 against Vancouver. He put Skinner back in after Pickard had played really well. Mm-hmm. He squeezed down Nurse's minutes. Then he's expanded Nurse's minutes. He changed their defense pair. He took Desharnais out of the lineup for a guy that had been in the American League all year. Like, these are huge decisions, and he makes them with such poise and confidence. I think that goes and hangs on their team as well. They look different to me. They look like they could win a bunch of 2-1 games, even though that might not have been the way that they draw it up. They're like, okay, this is what we got tonight. Paul Maurice, I think, is having the time of his life. I do feel like when he left Winnipeg, he was worked. Like, he was exhausted, he was done, and then moves to Florida. This opportunity shows up at the right time. It's just like he's embraced all of it. I know his media stuff is what a lot of people see, and he's just having a gas with that.
Yeah.
When we get a chance to talk to him prior to a game, you ask him a question, he answers a question that's 3 questions down the road. Like, he started coaching when he's 28. I think he's, I don't know, is he late 50s now?
Yeah.
Right? And what has he not seen? Good, bad, otherwise. He's been hired, he's been fired, he's been fired, he's been hired. He's had good teams, he's had bad teams. He's been to the finals, he's lost. He's been to the finals, he's lost. Like, there's nothing that is going to catch him by surprise. He made a change. You know, I just talked about the adjustments that Kris Knoblauch had to make. In game 3 of the Ranger series, things were kind of going a little sideways for them, even though they had played decently well. And they were down 4-2, came out for the third period, he changed all the lines. And when he changed those lines, Like Verhaeghe went up with Barkov. Kachuk dropped down. They moved Rodriguez into center for the most part and kept Bennett on the wing. And then he dropped Tarasenko to Lundell and Luostarinen. It was like, click, it just worked. And there'll be a time in this series, I don't know when it'll be, he'll change the lines again. Something won't look right, and he'll change them again. And that's the feel of a guy that's been there and is comfortable. So I'm really intrigued because Chris Knoblauch is a very good coach. He seems like the type of guy that I would like to play for. Calm, steady, straight ahead. Like that. I think that's a very admirable way to go. And Maurice looks like he would be a guy you'd love to play for. I mean, he is hard and demanding, and he's on it. He is just on it.
We've all known coaches who love the limelight. Like, they go out for dinner, they want the front table in the star restaurant. Other coaches will go to the star restaurant at the back of the room. Chris Knoblauch looks like a guy that would just order pizza.
I can't. I mean, what does he do? Anything that makes you think of, oh, you should look at him. Watch when he argues with a referee. It's the most polite argument, but it would be at your own peril. Would you look past that and think that he's not competitive, that he's not as fiery as some other people? He just, again, I go back to the farmer mentality of, I have today, I've got to get all this stuff done at the farm, and then I've got to move forward. And that's what he does. He's got all this stuff to do. He talked about before Game 7 of Vancouver, the Vancouver series, which you kind of forget. It seems like it was months ago. They were down 3-2 in that series. Like that could have been it for them.
Yeah.
And he said, it gets to Game 7. There's not much for the coaches to do now. This is for the players here. He said, the difference now is, as opposed to being an assistant, is we all talk about a lot of things, but then I've got to decide. But he didn't say it in any other way than these are the facts. This is what an assistant does. This is what I do. This is what I'm doing now. And I've got to make these calls. And he was talking about, going back to Skinner and, Perry coming out and not playing in Game 7 and trying to get a little bit quicker lineup. And then the next series, it was Broberg into the lineup when things weren't going so well early on. He's done almost a masterful job, I would say.
Paul has coached against Edmonton in the playoffs. Was it not in the bubble?
Did you not just erase all of that from your memory?
Yes.
When people talk about the bubble and that year, I'm like,
yeah,
I have almost no recollection of any of it.
When all the divisions were separated and it was all Canadian division.
Right. It was for so many reasons, it was so odd. And so when you bring that up, I'm like, oh, did he? Like
now I'm questioning myself. I'm like, but that did happen.
It had to have happened. Of course it did. He was in Winnipeg.
Yes.
They had to play. They weren't playing anyone else.
What do you think the experience of his Winnipeg time being associated with Edmonton and does it give him an advantage? And then you got Matthew Tkachuk, you got Bennett. Like there's
yeah, you know what? I don't think that gives them any more of an advantage, really. I mean, the fans in Edmonton will despise Tkachuk and Bennett the second they step on the ice, and of course that goes back to the Battle of Alberta, and that's just kind of the way it's supposed to be. When for Paul, though, I think it's everything that's more current. You have a couple of years of scouting past then. You have a couple, what more do you need to see from McDavid and Draisaitl? I mean, you're standing behind the bench or you're watching them 20 times a year on TV. The one thing he said, I thought this was really interesting because they've been through Tampa, Boston, and the Rangers, and it's Kucherov and point, it's Pasternak, it's Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin. And he said, we don't really change the way we defend much, no matter who it is, because otherwise you're chasing their game. We play the way we play. Now, I think that's a bit of a broad stroke. I don't think they'll not have a little bit of a different look for McDavid. But you can't make the Florida Panthers something else. They're built a particular way to play a particular way, whether Connor's on the ice or not. Yet I would think one of the things they'll try to do, and I think every team tries to do it, it's just hard, is that when the play is in your offensive zone, if there is a turnover, first man, yes, is on the forecheck, next guy's a step in front of McDavid. Try and make him have to adjust, rejig his path up the ice, because we've seen what happens when he gets around the corner and it's clean sailing. It's good night. Like the next time you catch him is when he runs out of room at the other end. So I think that's
or a center ice.
Maybe, yeah, right.
When they drop the puck. Yeah.
But that's maybe the way that you attempt to defend him as much as possible. Is you can say, oh, you got to take the body on him. Do you know how hard it is to take the body on a guy that's that agile and that shifty? Mm-hmm. And it's not like 1987 when you could just hook him and water ski up the ice. So you have to get to him as fast as you can and get somebody right in his face, so that he has to go around that guy. He's got to adjust the way that he can receive the puck. Maybe you hold him getting the puck 2 or 3 more strides. That gets him closer to the defenseman. And so now the defenseman can stand up tighter, because if Connor gets 15 feet in front of the defenseman, they're not standing up.
Right.
It's too far. They got to back up. Yeah.
So Cinderella has this year off.
Yep.
Kind of fun.
It is. This is. These are the 2 best teams. I thought Dallas was. I thought Dallas was going to win for a lot of the year. They just seemed to find the goals they needed. I was really surprised how they played in Game 5. That was quite a surprise to me. I thought they would win Game 5, and then they did everything they could in Game 6. And sometimes you just don't win. But when you're out of strikes, well, then you're out. But there's no Cinderella to either of these teams making it here. That's for sure.
I know you got to go, but what are you going to do in the flight?
Ooh, well, I'm taking a red eye, so I'm going to sleep.
Okay.
But that only gets me halfway. And then I've got a bunch of stuff downloaded. I use the plane as my office. So I'm home here. I've been home since Sunday. Got home at 2:00 on Sunday from Florida. Cammie left. My wife left at 11 to go to the scouting combine in Buffalo. So I haven't seen her yet. She gets home late tonight, and then I leave tomorrow. And then by the time this thing is over, the final's over, I think she'll probably be at the draft. So at some point, I'm hoping to, see her, take her for lunch or something or other. I don't know. But in the meantime, I'm making breakfast. I got kids getting ready to school and stuff. So it's a busy week. It's a good week at home.
Hey, I can't wait to watch it. It's a Stanley Cup final, and you between the benches is going to be awesome. Have fun, buddy.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. We'll give me a call if we got one more check-in. You never know. But it's going to be 3 weeks, so there's going to be time. There's going to be time.
Be well, buddy.
Okay, take care.
Ray's a big golfer. Massive, massive fan of the game. So this week off, a lot of people think it eats into your summer. Well, he can play a little golf. He can get out there. He can hit it around. And then he's got the Stanley Cup final where he can get back to Vancouver, maybe for a stretch with the 2 days between games. But it's a fun time of the year. It's an amazing time of the year. And he's going to be able to blend both worlds into this Stanley Cup final matchup between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. Largest distance between teams in a Stanley Cup final. So he'll be able to watch all the YouTube videos of his golf game during the flights. That's going to be fun to watch. Just a note on Dallas. I was with Ray. I thought they would win the series going into it, coming off the Central Division title. Things just dried up for them offensively. That bodes well for Edmonton because their defending 5-on-5 against the Dallas Stars was an eye-opener to me. in that series, not giving up a lot. Game 6 excluded, and especially off the rush. Notice off the rush, if there's no chances off the rush by Florida or limited chances in transition, that is going to give you a great indication of where Edmonton's game is, and that's on a really positive front. So I think that's the biggest stride for Edmonton that we've seen throughout the season, but it's accentuated, it's really highlighted during the Stanley Cup playoff run, is their ability to limit teams in transition off the rush, and that's affected their progress 5-on-5. For the Florida Panthers, I've got it in my heart, like, you can't go to the Stanley Cup final back-to-back years and not win. I know Ray said, and he's right, the urgency for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and the pressure on those two gentlemen and that organization to win is huge. Factor in Canada not winning since 1993, a Canadian-based team not hoisting the Stanley Cup since the Montreal Canadiens. Gary Bettman's first time presenting the Stanley Cup was the last time a Canadian team won. It goes back that far. There's pressure there, but not winning in back-to-back years would be just cruel getting to the Stanley Cup final, and I think they're way better, not just health-wise, but just way better in what they've been able to do with their team. And Bob is fresher. He hasn't been leaned on as much during this run, and it doesn't feel like, maybe I'm wrong, send us a note on this, there hasn't been that marquee Matthew Tkachuk moment yet. And I just feel like that is just waiting to happen during this Stanley Cup final against the Edmonton Oilers. And that the whole Calgary-Edmonton rivalry from the past is right there. And Paul Maurice did beat Edmonton in the Stanley Cup playoffs once before. It was an odd year. It wasn't the bubble. It was the next year when they had the divisions just made up because of COVID and not going across the border in that Canadian division. Paul has beat Connor McDavid in the Stanley Cup playoffs before, so that's a storyline that we're going to watch. In the meantime, there's a long time between the conference finals and the Stanley Cup final. If you need a little bit of your hockey fix, check out The Garden Party. And this is from NHL Productions. It's an awesome new podcast that's available. It looks back at the New York Rangers. We talked to Eddie Olczyk last week, and we had some stories about the 1994 celebration and that journey. Well, this really dives into it, Garden Party, with NHL backstory, with the focus on the 1994 Stanley Cup Championship won by the New York Rangers, the first time in an incredible stretch that snapped a 54-year drought. And it was Mark Messier celebrating. It was my buddy Nick Kypreos. He's part of the Garden Party. Brian Leach is also part of this story. It's absolutely brilliant. Adam Graves is in it. Old footage of and sound bites from Neil Smith and Mike Keenan. It's awesome. But that was epic. They ended that 50-plus year drought, and now it's 30 years and counting. So it's almost this current generation of New York Ranger fans can really relate to the euphoria and being able to soak up a Stanley Cup playoff drought, and those from the past can also enjoy it. Nathan Lafayette, by the way, hit the post in the final seconds of Game 7, a 3-2 win by the New York Rangers, and Brian Leach and Mark Messier and company celebrated one of the great moments in Garden history, the Garden Party, and they also talk about their favorite bar during that run and afterwards, and I think Kipper still gets free beers there. Ben Cook has been handling things this week. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Awesome stuff. As producer Bob is at the NHL Combine. Two things happening right now. The Combine, the Stanley Cup Final, and it all feeds into the draft, and we'll focus a little bit more on that and get you up to date and recap the opening few games of the Stanley Cup Final next week on the Chirp Podcast with Darren Millard.